Since its inception in 1977, Star Wars has been in the cultural zeitgeist throughout generations. Decades after the original trilogy, it was hard to get away from the constant exposure, as merchandise for the franchise was extremely popular, and references to the movies were prevalent in other forms of media. They were championed as classics while still maintaining pop cultural dominance. One way Star Wars maintained its popularity is through the expanded universe, a multimedia franchise that lasted for over 2 decades, introducing the general public to characters such as Starkiller and Captain Rex, who were considered widely popular by fans, while others were, let's say, obscure, like Max Rebo, the jizz-playing musician. Star Wars fans are known for many things, but most importantly is their love for the expanded universe and its characters, leading to the term Glupshido, a fake character created to make fun of this obsession with the expanded universe. And that's what I want to go over in today's video. I want to talk about the history leading to Glupshido, why people like these obscure characters, and sprinkle in some of my favorites. It's 1983. You just got Return of the Jedi, clenching your Vader figure, anticipating for the next Star Wars release, hoping to get more movies in the near future. But that was it. The trilogy was over, and until 1999, you wouldn't know the joys of sucking on Jar Jar's tongue. That would all change with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire in 91, the first in the Thrawn trilogy that was beloved by fans. While there was an expanded universe prior to these novels, they were more or less confined by the original trilogy, being set in between or close to the events, never being able to give us a peek into what could be in the far future for the franchise. As well, these novels set in stone many concepts that would be familiar in the expanded universe, such as the planet Coruscant, and was actually the first mention of the planet Coruscant. They were extremely popular for the time. These were essentially touted as the sequel trilogy that never was. This trilogy would introduce pivotal characters such as Admiral Thrawn and Mara Jade. Timothy Zahn is an important figure, but to give some background information, Zahn was working towards his PhD in physics and only picked up the science fiction genre because he was disappointed in a lot of the work that was coming out at the time. And you know, considering how most works coming from disgruntled fans turn out, creating the Thrawn trilogy could be worse. As well, he was already a prolific author before getting to Star Wars, earning himself a Hugo Award for his novella Cascade Point. And for all my gamers out there, that's like top 500 in book elo. Zahn had barely any oversight from Lucas. Hell, he would go on saying that he barely even talked to the guy, only really talking to his people, as he said, and getting yes or no answers from them. This essentially gave him complete creative control while writing the Thrawn trilogy for the Star Wars franchise. But Zahn would dedicate himself to making sure his work did not interfere with any of George Lucas's continuity, even flexing his PhD a little bit by figuring out the physics of hyperspace.
Trying to figure out how hyperdrive worked. And one suggestion was you get yourself into hyperspace and then you have to decelerate out. And the problem with that is if you have to decelerate as opposed to it happening automatically, you have a railgun.
And the scrutiny for details was essentially the main appeal for fans when it came to the expanded universe, loving how each story was a fountain of information waiting to be explored. The expanded universe was so in-depth, in fact, all the patrons you see in the cantina during A New Hope, they all had full names and backstories attached to them. Small little details like this or inconsequential characters went a long way for the original trilogy and its expanded universe. In 2012, George Lucas would sell Star Wars and Lucasfilms as a whole to Disney for $4 billion. Citing that he wanted to retire from filmmaking as getting new projects off the ground was pretty difficult, since the prequels' reception were mixed and his project Star Wars Underworld's plan fell through. Remember the whole spiel that I went on about the expanded universe and its history of rich characters? Well, the first thing that Disney did was cancel the Clone Wars and completely decanonize the entire expanded universe, relegating it to the Legends title. While beloved by fans, Legends was a beloved mess, to put it lightly. By the nature of having so many writers, there were bound to be a few bad apples. For example, Luke. Not spelled with one U, but two. The evil clone of Luke Skywalker created with the DNA scrapped from his lost hand. As well, George did try maintaining some consistency with Legends, like using the aforementioned Coruscant. He never actually read or engaged with anything that came from Legends. I don't read that stuff. I haven't read any of the novels. I don't know anything about that world. That's a different world from my world. While he would try not to step on anyone's toes, he would ultimately do so with some of the ideas introduced in the prequels. Most notably, in the Admiral Thrawn trilogy, the clones were described as the enemies of the Republic rather than being as a grand army as we see in the prequel movies. Retcons weren't exactly uncommon by this point, as the Clone Wars essentially retconned the entire Clone Wars multimedia project from the early 2000s. By changing certain characters' fates and arcs, undermining characters introduced, and contradicting lore established, such as inhibitor chips implanted in clones. But the biggest retcon would have to be Mara Jade. George famously had a grudge against her.
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
I'm sorry, Zed.
No way.
You brought
No
it on
way.
You brought it on yourself.
I don't want you here.
While some say that he saw her as a pinup girl and was disgusted by this characterization, and there is evidence that he was a feminist. I mean, look, he was part of the Free the Nip movement, and
They bring me to George, takes one look at me, and he says, "You can't wear a bra underneath that dress."
but the most accepted theory is that George Lucas didn't like the idea of Mara Jade marrying Luke, even going back to retcon their marriage and say that no Jedi can marry or have kids. Damn, imagine hating a ship so much that you ruined a marriage for everyone else. Unless you were Ki-Adi-Mundi, but who could say no to that face? It was a too many cooks scenario, and Disney wanted to only use the original films for the sequels, which never saw any controversy at all. Oh, and there was Rebels too. Finally, people got their wish of more Star Wars flicks, but seemingly never learned their lesson from the first time they got new Star Wars movies. Because after the success of The Force Awakens, Disney had a thought. Hey, wait a minute. We did that MCU thing, and that made us a lot of money. What if we just did that with Star Wars? And then boom! You had movie after movie, spin-offs designed to focus on fan-favorite characters or events, leading to the dreaded post-credits scene. This was their attempt to make Star Wars an interconnected universe of movies akin to the MCU. Try is the main keyword, as this approach to giving anyone with a name a movie flopped shortly after Solo. Main criticism coming from the fact that they recasted Han, which I never understood because the idea of old Harrison Ford running around in a prequel film next to some 20-year-olds is pretty hilarious. But the majority of people did criticize these movies as giving unnecessary answers to questions nobody asked. Nobody cared to know what Solo's name came from, and the scene alone teetered on parody. I mean, fuck, listen to this.
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
Say that again?
No wonder Harrison Ford begged them to kill him off. God. This critical and financial flop would cause most of the movies announced either to be canceled or retooled as Disney Plus shows. Outside of The Mandalorian, Star Wars never reached the same heights as The Force Awakens, causing Disney to rethink their approach for a moment. Wait, what if we just used the shit from Legends? Reopening the floodgates for ideas like Admiral Thrawn to return, even giving Zahn to write a duology for him leading up to his appearance in Rebels. In general, Disney leaned more into the idea of cameos when marketing these shows. Of course, fans for decades would come to these shows expecting to see their favorite characters once again finally back in the canon. It started with fan-favorite characters such as Ahsoka and Luke Skywalker, but he was an evil CGI Wait a minute. But shortly after, started grabbing more Z-lister characters. While most of the general public didn't have a clue who these were, die-hard fans ate it up, culminating in a 2022 Tumblr post coining the term glup shitto. The post was made to make fun of Star Wars fans and their vocal love of nostalgia-based pandering and obscure characters. Let me tell you a story. You know those times when you lay in bed struggling to sleep because you can't stop thinking about all the embarrassing things you did as a kid? Well, one that always stuck out to me when I was no older than 9 years old. I was in grade school and we were learning about voting with an in-class example. The topic, of course, was Pokemon. I had most of the handheld games at the time and an entire binder full of the cards. It was a massive part of my childhood, to say the least. So obviously, my hyperfixated ass shot their hand up and was called upon first to give a suggestion. Now, you might ask, what Pokemon did I blurt out? Of course, there's the obvious choices like Pikachu or Charizard, maybe Blastoise with his cool cannons on his back, Or I could choose a powerful legendary like Mewtwo or Rayquaza Ammonite. My first choice for the best Pokemon was a blue Nautilus shell with googly eyes. Honestly, I couldn't tell you why he was my favorite. I never used him in the games, to be honest. You only get him at like level 5, and by that time it's a chore to level him up. All your Pokemon are probably fully evolved and you had at least one water type to get there. I think it maybe had to do with owning his card and really liking the art, thinking it was cute. No shit, I lost the Pikachu in a historic landslide. I was pretty beat up about it. Not only because it cemented my status as a social outcast for picking such a lame Pokemon, my friend attempted to comfort me, but all he could muster was, I'm sorry, I would have voted for an Ammonite, but I have no clue what that is, dude. This is my first experience being a fan of Glup-Shido. I tell this story because I think the most important aspect of a Glup-Shido is being utterly unremarkable in your appearance. That's why Ammonite is so important for this, because look at him again. Out of all the Pokemon you can get in Red and Blue, not even past that, just the original games, this guy kinda stinks. He has a poor stat distribution, just blue. He's one of many water types in the game, and he's completely optional, and compare him to Kabutops, which is the other option you could get instead of him, and it speaks for itself. There's a reason why this guy got only one vote. When you're a fan of Glup-Shido, you might have to adjust your expectations just a tad. Of course, a main character like Anakin Skywalker, someone who's the badass hero of the Republic like Anakin, is going to have all these cool moments attached to his name as he's the center of the plot and is literally destined for greatness, while others are quite literally named I'm a Gundai, who are destined to make one appearance before shortly being killed off. But that just makes these Glup-Shidos and their cool moments even better. They stick out more because they're less common. Another important aspect of Glup-Shidos is niches, roles that certain characters fill. Take Anakin Skywalker again. He's the main character who wears his heart on his sleeve and he thinks with his heart before his brain. People love a reckless main character. Well, someone like Kit Fisto is known for water, I guess. But when you get a sequence with Kit Fisto fighting off and underwater, it's cool. You don't see that often. While some may love his approach to his combat, it's not for everyone. That's the niche. If you want your universe to feel lived in, you're inevitably going to have these characters who fill these mundane roles that won't impact the larger narrative outside the echoes of their actions. Now, my favorite Glup-Shido from Star Wars has to be Plo Koon. Look, I know Plo Koon kind of looks like a rotisserie chicken, but I love him. One of my favorite parts about Star Wars in general is all the weird different alien species that you kind of see around in the background. And the prequels really leaned into this idea of an interconnected galaxy by giving so many different races on the Jedi Council, Plo Koon included. A big thing in the prequels is the fall from grace the Jedi Council faced during the War on the Republic. Moral conundrums of mismanagement of planets and unethical sourcing of their clone troopers, treating them more as tools than people. While Plo Koon was not only empathetic towards his clones, they even called themselves Plo's Bros in the Clone Wars series. He would even venture off into space to save some of his clone troopers, showing that he truly cared for them and treated them as their equals. And not just with the clones, he would even impart advice to Syrian Jedi like Anakin and Ahsoka. He even treated Ahsoka more as a daughter-like figure rather than an apprentice. He even had an orange lightsaber until he didn't. I guess Samuel Jackson gets special privileges while, let's see, Matt Sloan doesn't get any. You can even see his compassion through the use of the Force. During the hostage situation, Plo Koon just randomly pulled out Force Lightning, but it wasn't just any Force Lightning, it was orange lightning called Electric Judgment. Even he was confused by it and went to the council immediately to go,
Lightning bolt shoot from my fingertips!
I guess what I'm trying to say is that, for me at least, his niche was that he was just a good guy in a world that was slowly turning corrupt. Though, he was also an ace pilot, even rivaling Anakin at times. There's also a reason why Glup-Shidos are underwhelming in most aspects. Now look, even though Plo Koon didn't get the most amount of screen time in the prequels, sometimes a lack of screen time could be for the best. It may sound crazy, but keeping things open-ended is what truly draws people towards these glup shittos. For example, Boba Fett. He shows up for about 6 minutes, captures Han Solo, flies around, and then gets vored. By all means, he would be a glup shitto, but obviously this isn't the case. He's one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise and even has his own Disney Plus show. But how did he get so popular? Well, according to the documentary Under the Helmet, his popularity soared well before his first appearance. When marketing for the 5th episode was underway, it was common to have marches featuring Star Wars characters in costume, and during these parades, a mysterious figure could be seen standing next to Darth Vader. That, in fact, was the unknown at the time Boba Fett, and seeing a masked figure stand so close to the Iron Fist of the Empire, fans ran wild with theories of who could it be, leading to a massive wave of popularity and toy sales exploding around the film's release, cementing himself as a cornerstone of the franchise, being the framework for the clones we see in the prequels and Mandalore, some of the most important parts of the series. All this popularity stemming from what he could be and not for he was. When it comes to fan works, headcanons can sometimes get a little carried away. You know, the ship of Theseus, the question that if a ship is the same if all its original parts are swapped out. Well, that's pretty usual with a lot of fan works. Enough headcanons and characters no longer resemble the characters they were. I mean, the biggest culprit of this, at least for Marvel Comics, would be Moon Knight. You Google his name and you're immediately confronted with funny little panels of him calling Dracula his bitch and being overall quirky. The problem is that none of these panels are real, but that's what's most people's, all while all 5 Moon Knight fans are still mourning the joke inclusions in Marvel Rivals, mischaracterization be damned. But, to return to the ship of Theseus, when a character more resembles an unfinished raft, it's hard not to build it up to be a ship. That's why people have so much fun with glup shittos. There's so many unexplored ideas that lend themselves to fandom spaces to help develop them. And that's kind of the problem with the way Star Wars is approaching to these glup shittos. They tend to want to explain everything and give us every single little detail, either because of nitpicking fans who will find problems with anything, or seeing the untapped marketing potential of these characters. But that's the problem. They essentially built the ship for the fans when they love the fact that they can build the ship from pieces they were handed. It also steps in the way of this personal connection they may have with these glup shittos. While yes, you built the ship in a specific way, they might not like how you built it. No fault of the author, people just tend to have their preconceived notions of what they want, and sometimes canon doesn't measure up to that. Another reason for the explosion of glup shitto style characters, before the internet, nerd culture was more of a in-the-know kind of deal. That a lot of the information about obscure characters you kind of had to go out of your way to find. While nowadays, with the internet, there's a wiki page for pretty much anything. The bar to entry is pretty low when you don't have to read up on any of the source material. Not to say this is how it should be, but there's a reason why comic explained videos do so well when comic sales have hit an all-time low. As well, social media has led to nerds being able to congregate and give their opinions on things, which may have been the worst thing to ever happen in human history. You see, in many spaces, even though you may watch the same shows and movies as them, everyone likes to think they're doing it better than anyone else. They treat liking these obscure characters as a badge of honor in a sense. That they're more of a fan because they like something less known. That you truly have to engage with the source material to know. Nothing has really changed outside of people being more vocal. So of course, people are going to hear about glup shittos more often. Despite nerd culture being completely brought out into the mainstream, they're still the butt of many jokes. I mean, look, if The Big Bang Theory can get away with how many seasons and multiple spin-offs, there's bound to be material to work with. So in a sense, glup shitto jokes is just a continuation of a beloved social tradition, making fun of Star Wars fans.